supposed to have a breakfast here?
You would think so.
Oh yeah, you would think so. We had breakfast at the hotel, so.
Wow, I got you.
We never have time to eat while we're setting up.
Brian,
There needs to be donuts at least.
That's
do
what
you
I'm
have
talking about, coffee? Exactly.
Right. I heard Starbucks was open though in across the hall now.
Thank you.
I gotta get the audio settings correct.
Yeah, let me see if they can feed us anything. I didn't catch your name. Hey, up in the booth.
She must have booked this months ago.
Oh, no.
Hello, everyone. I'm My name is Marvin Slaughter Jr., and I am the chairman of the Illinois African Descent Citizens Reparations Commission. The commission was formed in 2021 as part of a broader strategy from the Illinois Legislative Black Caucus to dismantle systemic racism. Specifically, it falls under the economic pillar of reform, seeking to promote equity, equality, and parity for those who are African American descendants of slavery. We're dedicated to being transparent about the work of the commission. And as a part of that transparency, we do have a website, ADCRC.illinois.gov, where members of the public can go to review our meeting minutes, our meeting recordings, and also stay aware and abreast of any upcoming meetings. We're intentional about attempting to engage with the public, and we also do have a petition of support and an email newsletter that'll also help to keep the public aware of what the commission is currently doing.
My name is Twyla Moore, and I am a commissioner for the ADCRC. For sure, my professional background has driven me to be involved in the commission and to continue to move the work forward. I was a probation officer for 21 years, so I have a passion for serving the underserved, people who don't have a voice, people who tend to be overlooked. You know, that passion has really pushed me to become involved in the that I know we need to focus on, and these are the areas where we can do more work to give a voice to those who aren't able to speak up and have a voice for themselves.
My name is Ted Williams III. I teach political science in the City Colleges of Chicago, and I am a commissioner on the Reparations Commission. So reparations work is important not only for the nation, but really for the state. African Americans have 1/10 the wealth of people of European descent in this country. And across the state of Illinois, we consistently rank in the lowest numbers around inequality for states. So this inequality will not fix itself. We have to do something. And so this work is really about exploring what the injustices have been, educating the public around this, and then recommending public policy that would address these issues specifically. But one of the issues that I personally am very passionate about, that we are kind of starting in, and we're dealing with other ones as well, but housing inequality, the loss of wealth and housing across the state. This has been a big issue. If you saw Evanston's work, they started with that issue as well, because really housing is the #1 way to build wealth in this society. So if you can deal with housing, you can start to deal with the wealth gap more quickly. But of course there's education. Of course there's lack of access to trades through unions historically for African Americans in the state. A number of other issues, but I think, you know, as we go through this work, we are going to really, fortunately and unfortunately, see a wide variety of spaces and places where these injustices exist. Sometimes I think about people like Dr. King and Malcolm X and some of my heroes from the 60s, and I wonder what they would be doing if they were alive today. I think they'd be doing this.
My name is Marvin Slaughter Jr., and I am the chairman of the Illinois African Descent Citizens Reparations Commission. The commission was formed in 2021 as part of a broader strategy from the Illinois Legislative Black Caucus to dismantle systemic racism. Specifically, it falls under the economic pillar of reform, seeking to promote equity, equality, and parity for those who are African American descendants of slavery. We're dedicated to being transparent about the work of the commission. And as a part of that transparency, we do have a website, ADCRC.illinois.gov, where members of the public can go to review our meeting minutes, our meeting recordings, and also stay aware and abreast of any upcoming meetings. We're intentional about attempting to engage with the public, and we also do have a petition of support and an email newsletter that'll also help to keep the public aware of what the commission is currently doing.
My name is Twyla Moore, and I am a commissioner for the ADCRC. For sure, my professional background has driven me to be involved in the commission and to continue to move the work forward. I was a probation officer for 21 years, so I have a passion for serving the underserved, people who don't have a voice, people who tend to be overlooked. You know, that passion has really pushed me to become involved in the commission and to really give a voice to say these are the areas that I know we need to focus on, and these are the areas where we can do more work to give a voice to those who aren't able to speak up and have a voice for themselves.
My name is Ted Williams III. I teach political science in the City Colleges of Chicago, and I am a commissioner on the Reparations Commission. So reparations work is important not only for the nation, but really for the state. African Americans have 1/10 the wealth of people of European descent in this country. And across the state of Illinois, we consistently rank in the lowest numbers around inequality for states. So this inequality will not fix itself. We have to do something. And so this work is really about exploring what the injustices have been, educating the public around this, and then recommending public policy that would address these issues specifically. But one of the issues that I'm personally very passionate about, that we are kind of starting in, and we're dealing with other ones as well, but housing inequality, the loss of wealth and housing across the state. This has been a big issue. If you saw Evanston's work, they started with that issue as well, because really housing is the #1 way to build wealth in this society. So if you can deal with housing, you can start to deal with the wealth gap more quickly. But of course, there's education. Of course, there's lack of access to trades through unions historically for African Americans in the state. A number of other issues, but I think, as we go through this work, we are going to really, fortunately and unfortunately, see a wide variety of spaces and places where these injustices exist. Sometimes I think about people like Dr. King and Malcolm X and some of my heroes from the 60s. And I wonder what they would be doing if they were alive today. I think they'd be doing this.
My name is Marvin Slaughter Jr., and I am the chairman of the Illinois African Descent Citizens Reparations Commission. The commission was formed in 2021 as part of a broader strategy from the Illinois Legislative Black Caucus to dismantle systemic racism. Specifically, it falls under the economic pillar of reform, seeking to promote equity, equality, and parity for those who are African American descendants of slavery. We're dedicated to being transparent about the work of the commission. And as a part of that transparency, we do have a website, adcrc.illinois.gov, where members of the public can go to review our meeting minutes, our meeting recordings, and also stay aware and abreast of any upcoming meetings. We're intentional about attempting to engage with the public, and we also do have a petition of support and an email newsletter that'll also help to keep the public aware of what the commission is currently doing.
My name is Twyla Moore, and I am a commissioner for the ADCRC. For sure, my professional background has driven me to be involved in the commission and to continue to move the work forward. I was a probation officer for 21 years, so I have a passion for serving the underserved, people who don't have a voice, people who tend to be overlooked. That passion has really pushed me to become involved in the commission and to really give a voice to say these are the areas that I know we need to focus on, and these are the areas where we can do more work to give a voice to those who aren't able to speak up and have a voice for themselves.
My name is Ted Williams III. I teach political science in the City Colleges of Chicago, and I am a commissioner on the Reparations Commission. So reparations work is important not only for the nation, but really for the state. African Americans have 1/10 the wealth of people of European descent in this country. And across the state of Illinois, we consistently rank in the lowest numbers around inequality for states. So this inequality will not fix itself. We have to do something. And so this work is really about exploring what the injustices have been, educating the public around this, and then recommending public policy that would address these issues specifically. But one of the issues that I'm personally very passionate about, that we are kind of starting in, and we're dealing with other ones as well, but housing inequality, the loss of wealth and housing across the state. This has been a big issue. If you saw Evanston's work, they started with that issue as well, because really housing is the #1 way to build wealth in this society. So if you can deal with housing, you can start to deal with the wealth gap more quickly. But of course, there's education. Of course, there's lack of access to trades through unions historically for African Americans in the state. A number of other issues, but I think, as we go through this work, we are going to really, fortunately and unfortunately, see a wide variety of spaces and places where these injustices exist. Sometimes I think about people like Dr. King and Malcolm X and some of my heroes from the 60s. And I wonder what they would be doing if they were alive today. I think they'd be doing this.
My name is Marvin Slaughter Jr., and I am the chairman of the Illinois African Descent Citizens Reparations Commission. The commission was formed in 2021 as part of a broader strategy from the Illinois Legislative Black Caucus to dismantle systemic racism. Specifically, it falls under the economic pillar of reform, seeking to promote equity, equality, and parity for those who are African American descendants of slavery. We're dedicated to being transparent about the work of the commission. And as a part of that transparency, we do have a website, adcrc.illinois.gov, where members of the public can go to review our meeting minutes, our meeting recordings, and also stay aware and abreast of any upcoming meetings. We're intentional about attempting to engage with the public, and we also do have a petition of support and an email newsletter that'll also help to keep the public aware of what the commission is currently doing.
My name is Twyla Moore, and I am a commissioner for the ADCRC. For sure, my professional background has driven me to be involved in the commission and to continue to move the work forward. I was a probation officer for 21 years, so I have a passion for serving the underserved, people who don't have a voice, people who tend to be overlooked. That passion has really pushed me to become involved in the commission and to really give a voice to say, these are the areas that I know we need to focus on, and these are the areas where we can do more work to give a voice to those who aren't able to speak up and have a voice for themselves.
My name is Ted Williams III. I teach political science in the City Colleges of Chicago, and I am a commissioner on the Reparations Commission. So reparations work is important not only for the nation, but really for the state. African Americans have 1/10 the wealth of people of European descent in this country. And across the state of Illinois, we consistently rank in the lowest numbers around inequality for states. So this inequality will not fix itself. We have to do something. And so this work is really about exploring what the injustices have been, educating the public around this, and then recommending public policy that would address these issues specifically. But one of the issues that I personally am very passionate about, that we are kind of starting in, and we're dealing with other ones as well, but housing inequality, the loss of wealth and housing across the state. This has been a big issue. If you saw Evanston's work, they started with that issue as well, because really housing is the #1 way to build wealth in this society. So if you can deal with housing, you can start to deal with the wealth gap more quickly. But of course, there's education. Of course, there's lack of access to trades through unions historically for African Americans in the state. A number of other issues, but I think, as we go through this work, we are going to really, fortunately and unfortunately, see a wide variety of spaces and places where these injustices exist. Sometimes I think about people like Dr. King and Malcolm X and some of my heroes from the 60s. And I wonder what they would be doing if they were alive today. I think they'd be doing this.
My name is Marvin Slaughter Jr., and I am the chairman of the Illinois African Descent Citizens Reparations Commission. The commission was formed in 2021 as part of a broader strategy from the Illinois Legislative Black Caucus to dismantle systemic racism. Specifically, it falls under the economic pillar of reform, seeking to promote equity, equality, and parity for those who are African American descendants of slavery. We're dedicated to being transparent about the work of the commission. And as a part of that transparency, we do have a website, adcrc.illinois.gov, where members of the public can go to review our meeting minutes, our meeting recordings, and also stay aware and abreast of any upcoming meetings. We're intentional about attempting to engage with the public, and we also do have a petition of support and an email newsletter that'll also help to keep the public aware of what the commission is currently doing.
My name is Twyla Moore, and I am a commissioner for the ADCRC. For sure, my professional background has driven me to be involved in the commission and to continue to move the work forward. I was a probation officer for 21 years, so I have a passion for serving the underserved, people who don't have a voice, people who tend to be overlooked. You know, that passion has really pushed me to become involved in the commission and to really give a voice to say, these are the areas that I know we need to focus on, and these are the areas where we can do more work to give a voice to those who aren't able to speak up and have a voice for themselves.
My name is Ted Williams III. I teach political science in the City Colleges of Chicago, and I am a commissioner on the Reparations Commission. So reparations work is important not only for the nation, but really for the state. African Americans have 1/10 the wealth of people of European descent in this country. And across the state of Illinois, we consistently rank in the lowest numbers around inequality for states. So this inequality will not fix itself. We have to do something. And so this work is really about exploring what the injustices have been, educating the public around this, and then recommending public policy that would address these issues specifically. But one of the issues that I personally am very passionate about, that we are kind of starting in, and we're dealing with other ones as well, but housing inequality, the loss of wealth and housing across the state. This has been a big issue. If you saw Evanston's work, they started with that issue as well, because really housing is the #1 way to build wealth in this society. So if you can deal with housing, you can start to deal with the wealth gap more quickly. But of course, there's education. Of course, there's lack of access to trades through unions historically for African Americans in the state. A number of other issues, but I think, you know, as we go through this work, we are going to really, fortunately and unfortunately, see a wide variety of spaces and places where these injustices exist. Sometimes I think about people like Dr. King and Malcolm X and some of my heroes from the 60s. And I wonder what they would be doing if they were alive today. I think they'd be doing this.
Lieutenant I'm Lieutenant I'm Lieutenant Governor Juliana Stratton, and I am honored to welcome you to today's public hearing. Thank you to our organizers, the Illinois African Descent Citizens Reparations Commission, for bringing everyone together. To Chair Marvin Slaughter Jr., the commissioners, and the dedicated team behind the ADCRC, I commend your dedication to leading this critical work. The ADCRC is leading a journey across our great state, a journey focused on addressing the systemic injustices that disproportionately impact Black Americans who descend from American chattel slavery. Through these public hearings, the ADCRC is offering a platform to amplify voices that have gone unheard for too long. The Commission works to ensure that the full diversity of our people's experiences, ideas, and perspectives directly inform the policies shaping Illinois' path toward justice. The topics you will hear about today are not abstract issues. They are lived realities for many of our neighbors and friends. Their truths are inseparable from our history, present and future as Illinoisans. In hearing these voices, we take an essential step toward crafting solutions that address disparities and build stronger, more equitable communities. To everyone joining us today, thank you for your commitment to this cause. Your presence is a powerful reminder that collective action is key to dismantling structures of inequity. Before I go, I want you to know this. I stand with you in this work. Together, we are building a brighter, more just future for generations to come. Let us be courageous in acknowledging hard truths and be bold in envisioning a future that reflects true equity, opportunity, and dignity for all. Thank you, and I wish you a productive and impactful hearing.
We would like to first thank Lieutenant Governor Juliana Stratton for that warm welcome on behalf of J.B. Pritzker and the Pritzker administration. And now we would like to welcome up Evanston Mayor Daniel Biss for an official welcome.
Well, thank you so much for including me this morning. Good morning. That was wonderful. Welcome to the ADCRC here to Evanston. I want to begin by shouting out some participants in Evanston's reparations work. We have a 7-member reparations committee chaired by Robin Rue Simmons, who will be speaking later on this morning and is with us and was really the lead founder of our reparations program. Also, a member of the committee is City Council Member Chrissy Harris, representing the 2nd Ward. Thank you for joining us this morning, Councilmember Harris. And also, Carlos Sutton is a member of the Reparations Committee. Thank you, Mr. Sutton, for joining us this morning. You know, in Evanston, we are proud of the work that we're doing on reparations. It's a funny thing to be proud of, because what we're doing is acknowledging, finally, our actions that we're not proud of, and acknowledging, finally, our own responsibility for taking a role in reversing the harm that we did 4 years deliberately. These are hard conversations. We feel that as much progress as we have made so far, we have far more progress left to make than we have. And we also know that, look, we are not going to solve this problem alone. We are part of a national and global movement of reparations. We're part of a rethinking of what our responsibility as a people is to realize the connection between that which we have done in the past and the problems that exist in society in the present. That connection that cannot be forgotten. We find ourselves sometimes getting criticism for our reparations work. People saying, you know, why is it my responsibility to repair harm that was done by someone else at a different time? And there's many, many, many compelling answers to that. But the most important answer by far is that we are living today in a society full of concrete, tangible, meaningful, and cruel inequities that were caused by the harms perpetrated by this municipality and so many other institutions across the country. And so the work that you guys are doing is so pivotal. It is so necessary for us to build the truly just, truly equitable society that we talk about so often and that we strive for. And we are here to stand with you in that effort, to learn from you, to partner with you, to find the best ways forward, and to build not only the knowledge, but also the commitment and the political will to move forward and create the society that we all want and that we all deserve. Thank you very much, and I wish you a wonderful, wonderful day for this critical work.
Thank you, Mayor Biss. I would like to begin by highlighting some of the work of the Illinois African Descent Citizens Reparations Commission up until this point. The commission has been active for about 2 years and a month now, and we are focusing critically on the following areas: enslavement, racial terror, political disenfranchisement, which was our first set of hearings that we hosted last year, Housing segregation, separate and unequal education, the pathology of the Black family, racism in environment and infrastructure, stolen labor and hindered opportunity, the unjust legal system, mental and physical harm and neglect, and the racial wealth gap. The ADCRC is here to focus on developing and implementing measures to ensure equity, equality, and parity for African American descendants of slavery here in the state of Illinois. We are tasked with holding hearings to discuss the implementation of those measures, as well as educating the public on reparations efforts for African American descendants of slavery. And under that, we are tasked with ensuring the preservation of African American neighborhoods and communities, building and developing a vocational training center for citizens of African descent, as well as ensuring proportional economic representation in all state contracting and the creation and enforcement of an Illinois slavery-era disclosure bill. Today, you will hear a lot of conversation regarding the harms that individuals who are descendants of chattel slavery here in Illinois have experienced. And we're going to focus on the 5 W's: the who, what, when, where, and why. I would like briefly to acknowledge each of our commissioners, starting with Commissioner Twyla Moore, Commissioner Jeffrey Trask, Commissioner Joel Sacknoff, Commissioner Ted Williams, Commissioner Monique Jones, Commissioner Deborah Cosi Lane, and Commissioner Roger Elion. Now, at this moment, I would like to invite to the stage Robin Rue Simmons for a conversation on housing segregation. And right before Robin Rue gives her presentation, I would like to invite Commissioner Monique Jones for a quick overview of our topic description and the location significance.
As they say in church, I won't be before you long, because thank you, Mayor Biss actually pretty much covered what I wanted to cover. As a commissioner, I have this job. Prior to the job that I have running Forefront, I was the president and CEO of Evanston Community Foundation at the time when the city of Evanston established its reparations fund with the city. We established a reparations fund with the foundation. So the significance of us being here today and talking about the 3 issues that we're going to hit that Chair, out of the long list that you saw that Chair Slaughter talked about earlier, we're talking about housing, legal system, education, and as Lieutenant Governor Juliana Stratton said, the truths are inseparable. We cannot separate ourselves from the effect that these things had due to chattel slavery on our history. Being here in Evanston, a city of 75,000 citizens, less than 8 square miles, having done the things that you all have done and bring these issues to light, we're interested in learning and hearing and understanding. It's not lost on me that we're doing this on the campus of Northwestern University, which, as you know, has a significant history with the city of Evanston. So all of these things pulled together made it significant for us to be here out of the first of several hearings that we will have this year. So I invite you to keep in touch with us, learn about the ongoing reparations hearings, attend them all. Come around the state so that you can hear what's happening in other communities and as we present this. So that is why we are here today. Those are how we are, all of our lives are inextricably intertwined as we learn together and bring about change together. Now it is my pleasure to introduce to you Robin Rue Simmons.
Thank you, Commissioner. We are so grateful to have you host this hearing here in Evanston. We've been working on this matter for a long time. So it was 2019 when we passed, but it was actually 2002 when our city passed its first reparations resolution, and that was led by the now Judge Lionel Jean-Baptiste when he was a second ward alderperson. I am very proud to have my neighbors here from Evanston as well. Evansonians, if you could just raise your hand. Yes, these are the folks that actually lead the work. I'm just the spokeswoman. So very grateful to have a mayor that stands firm on this work when it might be unpopular, even when we are attacked in various ways. Very grateful to have a strong city councilwoman and Councilwoman Chrissy Harris that is bold and makes things happen behind the scenes and in front of the scenes and everything else. Mr. Carlos Sutton, our elder leader on the reparations movement, just grateful to be here. I actually want to start with ancestral acknowledgement, and this is something that our committee that meets the fourth Thursday of the month at the city, it is a virtual meeting, we open with this just to ground ourselves. With great humility and deep gratitude, we honor the strength, endurance, and sacrifice of our Black ancestors. We honor those enslaved Africans whose forced labor was exploited for generations to help establish the economy of our region and the United States. We honor those Black ancestors who persevere despite the discriminatory laws and practices that created a racial caste system, legitimize anti-Black racism, and continue to plague our community today. It is only by recognition and understanding of these errors begun during the nation's origin and continuing today that we hope to correct our path. We acknowledge this exploitation of not only our minds and labor, but our humanity. We grieve for those Black ancestors who, despite their contributions to this city's wealth and freedom, were never recognized, fairly compensated, nor allowed to fully realize their own sovereignty. Because of their work, we are here and will invest in the descendants of that legacy. And through this process, we work to repair some of the harms caused by the city of Evanston. We also hope our focused attempts on reparations will serve as an example to the United States government, the state of Illinois, and prompt other institutional accomplices to begin the process of repair. This is from the Reparations Committee. I also want to acknowledge all of the reparations leaders that are here from near and far, including one that has come all the way from Jamaica Reparations Commissioner, Stephen Golden, also the Jamaica president of the UNIA. Thank you for being here, my brother. The wrong thing. I did that. Oh, there we go. So on the program, it says that I am the founder and director of First Repair. That is true. That is a national role that I hold. But today I am here as an Evanstonian, a daughter of the 5th Ward, and the chairwoman of the Reparations Committee. And like the great work that is happening for the state, we are looking at comprehensive reparations in Illinois, and I'm sure everyone is familiar with those 5 forms. Please feel free to screenshot this slide if you like. This is a slide that shows real feedback from the Evanston community. So we're gonna land on what our first form of repair is, but it's important to know that Black folks in Evanston, like Black folks in 100 other localities that I've now physically been in, are looking for comprehensive redress, all forms of repair in all the ways that we have been harmed. And housing is one of them. And so in Evanston, our resolution 126R19 addresses the harm in Evanston, very specifically exclusionary housing practices. That includes redlining, it includes exclusionary zoning laws, and that includes the relocation of Black homes. If you want to meet a family that has been a victim of that, please meet Mr. Carlos Sutton after this meeting, and he could tell you firsthand how his family was impacted. After me, we have a presentation by our then Corporation Counsel, Nick Cummings, and I'm sure he will share more about narrow tailoring and how we landed here as a first step. This slide shows Evanston's redlining history. This red area is also the historically Black community, and it is also the area today that has the most disadvantage, the widest racial gaps in all areas of livability. And so although redlining was outlawed when fair housing was passed, we still suffer from the same injustices and lack of access and opportunity in this historic map. Some of the exclusionary housing policies, of course, were legislative, and then there was also a culture of discrimination discriminating practices against our Black community. And this is an example of an article, North Shore Town Aroused, Influx of Negroes Alarms the Residents of Evanston, also Wilmette, Winnetka, and Glencoe. And so this is the type of culture and environment that our Black community lived in all across the state. So Evanston is just one more of another bunch of stories that I'm sure the commission has heard as you're doing your hearings across the state. Racial zoning and relocation of Black homes. In addition to legislative actions, like a particular zoning law that was passed in 1919 and enforced until fair housing was passed, so from 1919 to 1969, in addition to legislative practices, there were all of the other anti-Black housing-related practices, steering, not having access to capital, and so on. There is evidence and history of older people in the 1920s that were enforcing this as well. And so we have real estate practices and even evidence of some lawsuits against real estate brokerages that were steering and not allowing access for Black buyers and Black renters. So I stated that in addition to our policy, there are also massive bank denials as well for accessing mortgage loans and lack of opportunities for economic development as well as access to capital. And so in Evanston in 2019, when I called the question, and so many Evanstonians, many of them here today, began to support and advance this work, it was a $46,000 household income gap at the time. It's increased since then. I'm sure COVID had a lot to do with it. Our life expectancy gap is 13 years. That is the difference between Black families in Evanston and white families in Evanston not having 13 years more time to live, create wealth, enjoy our families, invest in community. And then we had a declining Black population. And it was that really called me to urgency, to lead in the fierce urgency of now. My neighbors, folks that I know personally, families that I grew up with, my family were really in an exodus in Evanston because of lack of affordability, lack of a sense of place, and we have declined in population since our height in 2000, but Evanston is a rich, historically Black community, has a rich, historically Black community. I would love for you to learn more about that history at shorefrontlegacy.org, and that is who helped us with the harm report and all of the reporting that led us to be able to accelerate our work in Evanston. As it relates to mortgage inequalities, we had a State of Black Housing report that was done by Mark Austin. He is a member of NARAB, the National Association of Realtors. It is the nation's longest-serving Black real estate trade association. And out of and this is a recent report, this is 2019, out of 1,487 approved mortgages, there were 95 that were approved by our Black community. And you could see some of the other numbers there in disparities and declines and so on. And so we landed on housing as a form of repair because of the anti-Black legislative practices, also the culture, the history, the other institutions as well. Although we have a lot of work to do, much of it will expand beyond housing, but it was that narrowly tailored framework that we were directed by our legal counsel as well as our community. The consensus in our community feedback, we had similar community meetings, engagement, and I'll talk more about that, the majority of that feedback was somewhere in the housing space. And so just to take a quick glance at what a legislative timeline looked like for us, again, it was 2002. It looks like it didn't make it on this slide, that resolution was passed, a local reparations resolution. Now, what that did was it held Congress accountable for H.R. 40. And so what we thought is why don't we do what we can within our purview? Why don't we look at ourselves, examine ourselves, our own history? What have we done while we are holding Congress accountable? What can we do hyper-locally to repair the historic harm and the current harm in our city? And that's how we landed on an introduction that happened in 2029. Lots of meetings like this, lots of public hearings, lots of feedback. We still have feedback that is ongoing and framing and improving our work and commitment in those committee meetings that I mentioned. I just want to talk about a few milestones. And the first I want to mention is African American Heritage Sites passing. So that is a program that is run by Shorefront Legacy Center. We, under satisfaction form of repair, we are at least acknowledging, celebrating, honoring those Black historic sites. So that passed. First Repair has recently become one of those heritage sites, but mostly it's been historical sites, the Black Hospital and other things, so you can learn more about that. And then where we landed on our first remedy, our proposal for restorative housing is where we landed on our first remedy proposal. Details, a lot of details, all of our work has been transparent. You can see that on the City of Evanston's website. Please do learn more about that. But we have been implementing and dispersing reparations. And so just going through this calendar, we started with $10 million from real estate transfer taxes. Since then, excuse me, that's wrong. We started with $10 million from recreational cannabis sales tax. And since then, we have added an additional $10 million from real estate transfer taxes. We have learned that home rule taxes are our most viable, as a home rule municipality, most viable way of funding our work. And we have begun dispersing. And so one thing that I would love to share with the community and even the commission is that modeling repair in every step of the process is something that we've been learning along the way. And we learned or realized that process racism is a real issue. And how do we manage our process and access to the application, the issues of digital divide, and also the issue with Black people not trusting the government, rightly so. So how do we address that? And so our city was able to partner with our public library and our Black churches in town so that our Black residents felt safe. They felt that they could trust the folks that were taking them through the process. They made it very streamlined, and our public library provided all of the information to help folks qualify, not only census information, but also they had access to all Evanston phone books and yearbooks and obituaries, and made it very easy to attain eligibility, and had office hours in local community centers, and did outreach very grassroots at the barbershops and in the community, as the community in places where the community would feel safe. And so now, just to give I should add this, our work went through our Equity and Empowerment Commission. So we didn't initially start with a reparations committee. It was introduced to a body that was appointed by the mayor to work on equity issues, which included the Black community. And so our commission, which includes Commissioner at the time, former Alderman Jane Grover is here, led us through a process that landed on the recommendations that then went to City Council and allowed us to establish the commission. And all of that happened in 2019, actually. Just wanted to add a few more of the recommendations that came that we haven't been able to implement, some because they're outside of our purview, and some we actually did. So provide property tax relief, right? So in our Black communities, our houses are overassessed. It's a huge issue. I'm sure all across the state, but particularly in Census Tract 8092 in Evanston, where we have great racial disparities. And it is causing such burden that includes everything from housing insecurity to loss of our wealth, really, because housing is the most likely path to building wealth. And so some of these recommendations are outside of our purview, but we still want to work with other government bodies that can pursue these. Provide housing repair and rehabilitation assistance. That's some of what we did in our first proposal, down payment assistance. That's some of what happened with our first proposal with $25,000, and provide housing rental assistance. And so we didn't directly do that, but our program did expand to cash as an option because we saw that some folks' housing stability and housing opportunity wouldn't be a track of home ownership for various reasons. And so we have expanded that to cash as well. Extensive community engagement. This is a big town hall that we had in Evanston. The UNIA was representing strong that day, so I love that the UNIA brothers are here. And I just wanted to end with the partners. We didn't do this alone. No one of us was smart enough to get any of this done, and we still have so much more work to do, and we leaned into our community and a community of practice even outside of Evanston. So NCOBRA was a very important mentor that it provided support. At the time, it was led by Cam Howard, but there are other NCOBRA members that are here today. If you're here, raise your hand. We had NARC, the National African American Reparations Commission. I'm now a commissioner there, played a huge role in our outcomes at Evanston Public Library. I mentioned Mark Austin was important in providing that Black housing report. Thurgood Marshall Civil Rights Center, which is at Howard Law School, led by Professor Justin Hansford. These are all partners available to the commission, and they are stood up to do this work. So they don't come with a contract, and they don't come with a cost and this sort of thing. This is what the work that they're committed to. Columbia University's school, and then Reparations United, and then this one that you can't see what that is, that's Osiris. So you're gonna hear more for Osiris later. And so that's the end of my presentation. I didn't know if this was set up for Q&A or not, but perfect. So I just wanted to add that we have dispersed about $5.3 million in direct benefits to Evanstonians, $25,000 at a time. Recipients are in this room. It is not a game. It is not hearsay. It is real. We have up to $20 million more to disperse and more to give. I also want to make sure that we shout out our interfaith community that has been a key partner. I imagine it will be the same for the Illinois Commission. They have raised $1 million to be a commitment to Evanston, and they are committed to doing that long-term, perhaps in perpetuity. So I want to thank everyone for being here in Evanston, and thank you for bringing this hearing here. It means so much to us that our state is doing this work. You know what, I'm sorry. We have 2 senators here from the state that weren't recognized. So it's important that we know we have state legislators that are supporting this work. Oh, you're gonna do that? Okay, sorry, all right, bye. Okay, I'm sorry.
And thank you so much, Robin. I would first like to take an opportunity to acknowledge some of our legislators and elected officials, including Senator Johnson, Senator Fine, Alderwoman Chrissy Harris, Senator Ellman, and Cook County Assessor Fritz Kagi. Now I would like to invite to the stage Nick Cummings.
Good morning. As stated, I am Nicholas Cummings. I'm here in my capacity as the president of the Cook County Bar Association. It is the oldest association of Black lawyers and judges in the country. As Robin mentioned, I'm the former corporation counsel for the city of Evanston. So it is good to be back in the community that I once served for approximately 3 years. It's also good to see the progress that has been made in the program that we work so hard together on. So my presentation today deals with the law and its impact on Black Illinoisans. As Robin mentioned, the presentation is done by Osiris. Osiris is a consulting firm that I founded after I left Evanston sort of at the behest of Robin, to be able to help other organizations that actually want to do this work. So repair and restoration is important. The legal framework that we built in Evanston is repeatable. I evangelize it every opportunity I get. I thank the commission for the opportunity to talk about something else other than Evanston, though, but I'm sure I will weave it into this presentation. So we're going to talk about how the law has and continues to oppress Black folks here in Illinois. And again, I am the founder of Cyrus Professional Services, former corporation counsel for the city of Evanston, who's the first municipality to actually use municipal tax dollars to provide repair and restoration in this country. So we're going to break down our talk today into four eras: the Reconstruction era, Civil Rights era, the War on Drugs, and present day. So Reconstruction era, the Illinois Constitution as written in 1870 explicitly prohibited slavery except as punishment for a crime. It would take 100 years before the Illinois Constitution was amended to include an equal protection clause, guaranteeing that no person could be denied equal protection under the law. In 1874, Illinois passed a law prohibiting segregation in public facilities such as hotels, restaurants, and railroad cars. However, enforcement was problematic. The laws on the books were rarely enforced by law enforcement officials, which was key to part of the legal framework, which I'll keep touching on later, but the lack of enforcement or the lack of ability to correct these wrongs to the rights of Black folks is a key linchpin in order to try and provide repair and restoration in this work. Illinois enacted its own Civil Rights Act in 1885. It was modeled after the Federal Civil Rights Act in 1875, which ultimately was ruled unconstitutional by the Supreme Court of the United States. Interestingly enough, the Supreme Court determined that the 14th Amendment only prohibited discrimination by the state and its local subdivisions, and therefore Congress lacked the authority to regulate private discrimination. The Illinois Act of 1885 was introduced by John W.E. Thomas, Illinois' first Black state legislator. In an act of an attempt for reparative and restorative justice, this act fined $25 to $500 for each violation, with the money going directly to the aggrieved party. Again, enforcement was problematic, with only fines being levied and law enforcement mostly looking like the offending party. You can imagine how likely the law was to be enforced. Moving on to restrictive covenants, touched on briefly by Robin. The famed case of Shelley versus Kramer was the result of a split in the state court systems. The Supreme Court of Missouri reversed the judgment of a state trial court denying enforcement of a private agreement restricting the use or occupancy of certain real estate to persons of the Caucasian race. Meanwhile, the Supreme Court of Michigan affirmed a judgment of a state trial court enjoining violation of a private agreement restricting the use or occupancy of certain real estate to persons of the Caucasian race. In this instance, there was no state statute, there was no law. These were private agreements that were enforced by the courts. In granting judicial enforcement of the covenants, the states denied the petitioners the equal protection of the law in violation of the 14th Amendment. And that is why the Supreme Court ruled that these covenants were illegal. But again, you see that the government was acting, even though there was no statute on the books, the government was acting and enforcing these in violation of the rights of Black folks. Moving on to the National Housing Act of 1934, which created the Federal Housing Administration, which institutionalized redlining. Redlining was a private practice, but the FHA essentially institutionalized it. The Homeowners Loan Corporation created maps that categorized neighborhoods by risk, heavily influenced by racial composition. These maps were used by lenders and insurers to deny loans to Black people. And unlike the Civil Rights Act of 1885, Illinois did not have any legislation to counteract these discriminatory practices. The lack of anti-discrimination laws allowed the practices of restrictive covenants and redlining to thrive. In this instance, the state was what we call, under the law, deliberately indifferent to the rights of Black people. I'm going to take a moment to briefly describe the theory of deliberate indifference. It's something I picked up when I was an assistant state's attorney defending civil rights cases. The theory of deliberate indifference is when the state or an agency is aware or should be aware of a violation of someone's rights and fails to act. So that failure to act now creates liability under civil rights law. And that is part of the linchpin of how we were able to create restorative justice and repair in Evanston. Between 1919 and 1969, the city of Evanston lacked any sort of enforcement authority to stop racial discrimination in the area of housing. And as a result, the city was deliberately indifferent to this practice for the people who were being denied loans, people who had their houses moved, people who were unable to secure housing as a result of racial restrictive covenants. That deliberate indifference is what we believe is key. Moving on to the Civil Rights era. The Civil Rights era saw new legislation meant to try and bring equality to Black people in Illinois. While these laws outlawed discrimination and increased enforcement, they did nothing to elevate or restore Black folk to places they would have been but for prior discrimination, which is actually the entire point here of our reparations and restorative justice work. The Illinois Fair Employment Practices Act of 1961 was one of the first state laws in the U.S. to prohibit employment discrimination based on race, color, religion, national origin, or ancestry. The Illinois Civil Rights Act of 1964, modeled after the Federal Civil Rights Act of 1964, prohibited discrimination in public accommodations, employment, and housing. It created the Illinois Department of Human Rights, and the Federal Voting Rights Act of 1965 made prior practices of voter suppression illegal, and the Illinois Human Rights Act of 1979 was more comprehensive and strengthened protections against discrimination. In 2020, it was amended to prohibit denial of employment based on a positive test for cannabinoids. So we have some progress here, right? But then, of course, taking two steps back, we enter the war on drugs. Many states around the country enacted laws imposing harsh sentences on drug users and sellers, and Illinois was no different. Illinois' Controlled Substances Act makes possession of certain drugs like cocaine, heroin, and methamphetamines with intent to deliver a Class X felony. For those of you who don't know, Class X is Illinois' highest level of felony, okay? Class X felony in Illinois will get you 6 to 30 years in prison. There were also mandatory minimum sentences for certain drug offenses, particularly those like cocaine or heroin. Manufacturing or delivering 15 to 100 grams of heroin will get you a minimum of 4 years in prison. There were also repeat offender enhancements, which they're used today for gun offenses, but have also been used for drug offenses. The Habitual Criminal Act can lead to a life sentence for those with 3 or more felonies, depending on the nature of felonies. Now, enforcement of these laws were not targeted to those manufacturing or importing drugs. Rather, addicts and dealers alike were prosecuted under the same laws, and I know this as a former assistant state's attorney in Cook County who actually clerked in the narcotics division in bond court. And you would see dealers and users alike being paraded in to see a judge to set their bond. In 1991, the U.S. Supreme Court case Harmelian versus Michigan held a criminal sentence is generally constitutional if a state has a reasonable basis for believing that the sentence will further any of the 4 main purposes of punishment: deterrence, retribution, rehabilitation, or incapacitation. The 8th Amendment does not require strict proportionality between the crime and the sentence, forbidding only a sentence that is grossly disproportionate to a crime. Thus, a first-time offender who may only wanted to try drugs for the first time being charged with a Class X felony here in Illinois is possible and completely constitutional. Black folks, of course, were arrested at higher rates and sentenced at harsher penalties. As a former assistant ASA, I can tell you that a 3-time drunk driver under Illinois law is potentially a felon, but a first-time drug offender is an absolute felon. The war on drugs had substantial impact on our communities, including loss of employment opportunities, housing discrimination, family disruption, and weakened social structures and networks. As we know, Black people, despite similar rates of drug use, are more likely to be arrested and receive harsher sentences. For example, mandatory minimum sentencing for possession of crack cocaine was harsher than the possession of pure cocaine by a ratio of 100 to 1. The marked increase in arrests and sentencing leads to criminal records that are at times prohibitive to obtaining gainful employment. This has negative economic consequences in the Black community, creating cycles of poverty and creating economic instability. Recidivism becomes an issue. A lack of access to gainful employment forces some back into a life where the only access to capital they have is criminal activity. Until recent changes to fair housing rules and regulations, having a felony conviction presented obstacles to obtain housing as well. In a little bit of irony, the most difficult housing to obtain for any convicted felon is public housing, In addition to those economic consequences, there are social consequences as well. These higher rates of incarceration disrupt Black families. Children of incarcerated parents face emotional and economic hardships. Speaking broadly, the reduced number of Black men in our communities created weakened social networks. The quintessential story of the streets raised me, especially our Black boys, who find solace in male companionships and other avenues that are not necessarily legal. In the war on drugs, the casualties in the Black community are much higher than the successes in reducing drug trafficking. Even now in 2024, the United States continues its war on drugs, with the current administration using the threat of tariffs to get countries that share our borders to increase efforts to reduce the amount of fentanyl in the United States. Now, I'm not here to offer commentary on whether the war on drugs was actually a war on Black people, but I can tell you that the laws that seemed racially neutral on their face were enforced in a way that certainly made it seem that the targets of the war were Black people. Moving on to the present day. There has been a lot of activity in Springfield. I know we have our state legislators here, commission is here, but 2020 was a flashpoint marking the next era in advancements in civil rights for Black people following the murders of Michael Brown, Laquan McDonald, and George Floyd. Illinois in particular has made several changes to try and balance the scales. In 2020, the recreational use of marijuana was legalized in Illinois, and that tax was instrumental in starting the fund in Evanston for reparations. Convictions of those convicted under the aforementioned statutes, if they were convicted for possession of marijuana, they were expunged. And the act has also made certain cannabis-related offenses automatically expungible. The Safety Act made changes to drug sentencing laws, eliminated cash bail, and allows for police discretion to write a citation for individuals in possession of less than 15 grams of certain controlled substances, which in the past was a Class 4 felony, right? So we are the Class X, Class 4, Class 3, Class 2, Class 1 are the levels of felony in Illinois, and so Class 4 being the lowest, you were automatic felon in possession of drugs, even under 15 grams. But now the Safety Act has allowed police officers the discretion to write tickets for that. House Bill 4123 amends the Unified Code of Corrections to change the calculation of time served for certain offenses. For example, murderers are required to do 75% of their time rather than 100%. Class X drug offenders are no longer restricted to sentence credits that they receive, whereas previously they were restricted to 7.5 days per month. Now, I know that seems very dense, so I'm gonna try to break it down best I can. If you are arrested in Cook County and you are in jail you are held in detention awaiting trial, there are days you get credit for in terms of your sentence. That time that you served in county jail counts towards your sentence time, right? That didn't happen for Class X felons. They were only allowed to receive a certain portion of that credit that they spent in county jail and had to do more of their time in state prison. Now, of course, and this as I was preparing for this presentation, I realized that California, in fighting the wildfires, were using incarcerated labor. So I had to figure out if Illinois is one of those states that uses incarcerated labor. Illinois still maintains a law related to incarcerated labor. 730 ILCS 5/3-12-2 requires that the Department of Corrections provide workers for Illinois correctional industries to work in programs established to train and employ committed persons in the production of foodstuffs and finished goods and any articles, materials, or supplies for resale to state agencies and authorized purchasers. So although Illinois does not lease inmates to private entities like the states of Alabama, California, Florida, Georgia, Texas, Arizona, Mississippi, and Louisiana, all these warm weather states, right? Workers are only provided in Illinois for state-run industries. I don't know what all those state-run industries are, but I do find that to be interesting that our incarcerated inmates, they're leased to the state to do work for the state, to provide goods for the state, to be purchased by the state. The legacy of enslavement and servitude laws, coupled with the 13th Amendment's punishment clause, continues to impact Black communities through modern policing and criminal justice system. The use of prison labor and the disenfranchisement of felons are key issues that perpetuate systematic inequalities. Illinois, while not leasing inmates to private companies, still grapples with these challenges, particularly in this criminal justice system. We see consequences of the war on drugs continuing on our communities, further perpetuated by housing segregation and implemented earlier still. We are fortunate here in Illinois in terms of the disenfranchisement of felons. I believe Illinois allows you to at least come back and get the right to vote after you've completed your sentence. There are several states where I think there's 11 states that once you are convicted, you never get the right to vote back. Or at least it's very difficult, as in Florida, you can get the right to vote back, but you have to pay your restitution and all these other fines that you still might owe in order to get your right to vote. I believe we used to call that a poll tax back in the day. So understand that the law has not always been the friend of black people in this state. But it is getting better. So I don't want my friends in the legislature to look at me with ire when I say that our hard work is being demoralized here. That's not true. I understand that there's been some advancements, but understand we still have a lot more work to do. And thank you for your time.
We will take a 1-minute intermission to push the tables up a bit. Yes. Is that better? Thank you all so much for your patience. I would now like to invite to the stage Africa Porter.
Peace, everybody. I'd like to ask permission from the elders to speak. May I speak? Ashe, thank you so much. I'll do my best. I give thanks to the African Descent Citizens Reparations Commission, the Illinois Reparations Public Hearing Committee, all staff, supporters, and all that you do, elected officials, those who are selected, all of you matter. Thank you, everybody, the staff that put this together, that have been doing this work tirelessly. Thank you to Northwestern, the AV team, especially Roger. Wherever Roger is, I want to say thank you. Thank you so much. I do a lot of work in therapeutic respite and mentoring, and we did have a shooting last night, so I apologize, Nick, for stepping out while you were speaking. We are dealing with a shooting last night on 43rd and King Drive, but we will push through. Thank you, Robin. All of the work that you've been doing with First Repair in the community of Evanston, you worldwide, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mama Jackie, Algie, your unwavering mentorship, your constant teachings, love, and support have blessed me, my family, and our community for decades. I appreciate you always pouring into me and so many others while teaching us all the same. Gratitude to Baba, Will Crosby. He, along with Kublai Ture Muhammad and Baba Revan Fellows, Coy Pugh are my Babas, and were dear students of my father's. And you all now teach me, and I'm grateful for the love you show me. Thank you. Thank you to my sister Georgia, who helped me to maintain and get myself together in the middle of a storm last night to still show up today. I pay homage and give honor to the utmost paramount respect to my parents, my father, Reverend Dr. Kwame John Porter, ancestor, and my mom, June Porter. She made 90 on Juneteenth. Amen. Amen. My parents taught me and all of my siblings, all 6 of us, so well that all 6 of us are in service to others every day. I thank God for my parents. The work I'm called and blessed to do as an organizer, an activist, a community servant, an executive producer of Chicago at the Crossroads documentary in the film industry, in public relations, as a consultant, is only because of my parents, through God. My father was a pastor, a professor, theologian, activist, author, and he was the first SCLC chapter president for Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in Chicago. My mother at 90 is still very active with the oldest civic organization, the Federation Women's Club, the Alfreda Wells Duster Club. This organization preserves the life and legacy of Ida B. Wells. My mom retired from teaching some time ago. She taught all grade levels, up to college, and even taught Sunday school. I dedicate today's speech presentation to my brother John. He was an entrepreneur way ahead of his time, who always believed in me and his family and his community. The first time I ever heard the word reparations was from my brother John. Rest in peace. I dedicate today to the Alderman Dorothy Tillman, who brought reparations to the council as an alderman, the late 90s, early 2000s. Dorothy Tillman. Today I will provide a presentation of the lack of proper educational support for Black people as it pertains to reparations. I will be showing some slides as well. I also want to dedicate today to our ancestors, our grandparents, our great-grandparents, those who fought, those who bled, those who birthed their children, those who breastfed their children, those who aren't here today, but we are here to represent them. I say. When I say reparations, you say repair the damage. Won't you join me? Reparations. Reparations. As Robin so eloquently said, we have to first repair. Reparations for the lack of education among Black people in the United States is a very significant topic. Would you agree? Yes. It is deeply connected to historical injustices, including slavery, Jim Crow laws, and systemic discrimination that have led to many disparities in wealth, education, and overall opportunities. It also is deeply rooted in the historical denial, somebody say denial, of educational opportunities due to slavery, segregation, and systemic racism. By the time my son was 9 years old, he had been in 8 different schools. Somebody say 8. Grateful for Dr. Nsantua Opong-Wadie, professor here at Northwestern University, and many other mamas and babas, we started Indigo Nation Homeschoolers Association that is still active some 15 years later. We graduate our own. Brother Malcolm, who will be 100 years old this year, said only a fool will let the oppressor teach his children. Y'all need to clap for homeschool education. I attended Kosminski Community Academy in the 1970s, excuse me, where I'm a very proud local school council member today and have been for some time. The staff was mostly Black, as it is now, and resources are still very low today, as they were then in the 70s when I was there as a student. I remember sharing with my parents how I wanted a park. The playground was missing some things. Other parks I would see in my community, my park didn't have. So I would see my parents active in the community, having meetings, and I coerced them to have a meeting on my behalf and my friends at my school, and we got us a park before I graduated 8th grade. Somebody say activism. For centuries, Black Americans have been denied access to quality education, a fundamental right that serves as the key to opportunity, progress, freedom, justice, and equality. What Frederick Douglass spoke about, what W.E.B. Du Bois and Booker T. Washington debated centuries ago. This denial was not accidental. It was by specific premeditated design, woven into the policies and institutions of this nation. Can we play video number 4, please? Thank you. Do I hit it twice? Okay, thank you.
For too many Black people, they said, what are we going to do? Well, let's build these high rises, but we can't put them in the white areas. Let's rip down houses in the Black community and house people within those neighborhoods. And all of those projects, with the exception of Cabrini, were built in all Black neighborhoods, and Cabrini then became an all Black neighborhood.
The reason that high-rise public housing was built in Chicago was an attempt by the city government to constrain the Black population of the city in the smallest geographic area.
That's not a recipe for success. That's a blueprint for disaster.
It was too late. Those buildings were destined to go.
In the documentary, Chicago at the Crossroads, director and writer Brian Shortoff and I were able to follow a young man from the west side of Chicago. After spending 9 months in juvenile detention and 9 months at Chicago Cred, he graduated and was able to see a better way, a better, more thriving life for himself and his family. What this shows is the lack of investment. Somebody say the lack of investment. And the support in a young Black person in the city of Chicago or any urban community around the world, and what can be produced.
You break down a city, it's like a tale of two cities. If you are downtown Chicago, you almost feel untouchable. Then you go south.
You go out to some of the neighborhoods, they just are starved for resources and investment.
That's abandonment. That's just systematic destruction.
It's that pot that's boiling, and stuff can start spilling out, or we can turn the fire down.
You hear people, they present the problem, and they say, yo, this is the problem, this is the problem, this is the problem. Okay, you're woke, you know the problem. What is the solution?
When I say reparations, you say repair the damage. Reparations. Reparations. Chicago Grammy Award winner GLC stated so well in Chicago at the Crossroads. Chicago really is a tale of two cities. Would you agree? On one hand, you have the glittering skyline, world-class dining, and booming business districts. On the other, there are deep inequalities, neighborhoods struggling with crime, like last night, underfunded schools, and economic disparities. It's a city of incredible culture, resilience, history, but also one where opportunities aren't evenly spread. The north side and downtown feel like a different world compared to parts of the south and west sides.
I guess it's like in my DNA to flock back. I'm not trying to downplay the violence. It was very violent. Some people came out shell-shocked. PTSD and all of that, This was a war zone, but at the same time, it was a paradise. I ride past here often. I say to myself, man, I miss the Iggies. I know a lot of people that were just put out. We don't care, you need to go, bye. If someone can just come in and snatch your whole world and livelihood from you, then what are you, you know?
I'm Lintessa Williams, former resident of the Harold Iggy Homes.
We see how Black students are more likely to face suspensions and expulsions, affecting their academic progress. The limited access to advanced programs, gifted programs, and well-funded extracurricular activities are often less available in predominantly Black schools. The teacher turnover rate in Black schools have often shown less support for the staff. Teachers have been reported for years purchasing textbooks, workbooks, and other learning materials which affect consistency in education. As an educator for many years, I have definitely seen a lot. Working as a respite therapeutic mentor with K through 8th grade with Metropolitan Family Services and others has presented many challenges as well. You may have seen ancestor Philip Jackson in the video. If you knew Brother Phil, you knew he would say what? Educate or die. Educate or when I say reparations, you say repair the damage. Reparations. Reparations. Philip Jackson, rest in power, started the Black Star Project in 1996. He said at that time, 1 out of every 3 children would see prison in their lifetime. I have 3 sons. I bear witness that one of my sons did. He was deeply committed to improving education for Black children, particularly in underserved communities. Through the Black Star Project, he promoted mentorship, parental involvement, the Fathers Club. Every first day of the school, he was doing what? Making sure that fathers took their children to school. He promoted academic excellence. If you saw Brother Phil and you said, how you doing? He would say, I'm excellent. Brother Phil was a strong advocate for community-driven solutions, emphasizing that Black children needed more than just school-based learning. They needed support from families, churches, and neighborhoods. His work also focused on closing the racial achievement gap and increasing economic opportunities for Black youth. With over 30 programs and initiatives to date, I'm still in awe of the speech Brother Phil wrote, I edited, entitled, Are We Asking Schools to Do What Schools Cannot Do? If you've not seen it, please look that up. In closing, I want to thank you all. Everybody in this room is beyond invested. You could be anywhere on a Saturday in Chicago, under the covers looking at the weather. I just want to say thank you and keep up the fight. It's important that we align with people like ourselves, because we're going to have the naysayers. It ain't going to never happen. Those people, it ain't going to never happeners. Yeah, we're going to maintain us, and we're going to stay focused.
About how many kids they were putting in a building versus the number of adults.
People who were concerned about their children playing were up 16 floors, while their children were 16 floors away. All of a sudden, the children are now creating their own rules for living without the connection to their mothers, their fathers, their uncles, their grandparents. If you could imagine a 16-story building pouring out children, and then the children deciding what they wanted to do, what was good, whether or not they wanted to fight, whether or not they wanted to steal.
You have to put all of this shift in public housing at the feet of public policy.
Everywhere I go, assessor. We went to Kenwood together. Y'all shout out the assessor in the building. Everywhere I go, there is a need, a question, a resource that is asked. Last Sunday, while at Healthy Hood in Pilsen, 3 young people approached me. One asked me if I could help them with housing. One asked me if I could help them find a job. One asked me, Brother Beckham, if I could give them a couple of dollars to get home from church. We are our own solution. When I say reparations, you say repair the damage. Reparations. Time is the only thing that we cannot get back. I close with this. I only have a minute. Only 60 seconds in it. Forced upon me, can't refuse it. I didn't seek it, I didn't choose it. But it's up to me to use it. Give account if I abuse it. Just a tiny little minute. But eternity is in it. You all chose the right time. The time is now. Ashe.
I would like to briefly make an announcement regarding anyone who would like to sign up for public comment. Please sign up at the registration table outside. You will be given a number. Public comment will start after our community speakers. Now I would like to invite to the stage Ayana Simba.
Okay, it's gonna be hard to follow that up, but good morning. My name is Ayana Simba, and during the day, I work as a city government affairs at the Illinois Environmental Council, which is a nonprofit organization. We represent about 130 environmental orgs across the state of Illinois. We do a lot of work in Springfield, but I'm making sure that we build out our work in Chicago. So I want to share a little bit about myself. So I've been here for 14 years, but I am originally from Michigan. That is my hometown. I didn't go to Michigan State, but I'm just from the city where it's at. I feel like that's the only way people know where Lansing, Michigan is. And these 3 coal stacks are essentially a landmark in my hometown. And me and my dad, we used to fish in this area. And I remember asking him, you know, why can't we eat the fish? Because we would just catch them, throw them back, catch them, throw them back. And he told me, he's like, well, you know, there's that factory right there. And so that was the first time I ever made the connection between, oh, there's this pollution, it can directly impact my life. And so while we didn't eat out of it, there were a lot of people, especially older, Black, and lower income folks that would eat the fish out of there. And sometimes my dad would kind of joke with them, like, you know, you shouldn't do that. And people would just kind of laugh it off. And for me, that was the first time I also saw a lack of environmental literacy. These are intelligent people, right? These are elders. These aren't people who are not sentient. But there was obviously a gap in environmental education. And so that's what led me into the work that I do now with environmental policy, doing all these amazing and wonderful fun things, including being here today. So I want to talk about environmental racism from a few different perspectives. One, I want to start off with hazardous job occupations. I know oftentimes in Black communities, we are told, you know, this may cause pollution, but it's jobs. We're gonna bring jobs, we're gonna bring jobs. And we never talk about what those jobs actually are and what those risks are posing to our communities and the actual workers there. And I also wanna say, I don't want to demean these jobs. There are people that still work in these industries. And our financial security for many of us is due to our parents, our grandparents working in this. So, you know, my financial security comes from my father being a crane operator, my granddad working at Upjohn as a plant operator. So I don't want to ever demean these jobs, but we do have to recognize the risk. And so historically, Black people, we have been relegated to low-paying, dangerous, unsafe jobs. And when I put dirty in there, I really just mean people are being exposed to chemicals and pollution that most other people want to avoid. So I was just doing some research, and I found this with an interesting example. This was in 1931 at the Hawks Nest Tunnel in West Virginia, right? Great Depression, 5,000 workers, mostly Black men, go to the area. They're like, I can make money, send my check back home. Ended up being where 500 people ended up dying because of an exposure to silica content, and about 170 died almost instantly. This was easily preventable. There's techniques such as wet mining that's been around since 1719. They didn't provide breathing apparatuses, and they didn't let the workers know the dangers of, they weren't aware of the dangers of their work. And so people literally died because of intentional negligence. And so moving forward to now, the modern hazardous workplace, right? We still have people that are in those types of jobs, but we also see this rise of e-commerce. I think everybody knows someone who works at Amazon or has worked at Amazon. And we know now with the rise of e-commerce, black workers compose 1/4 of the warehouse and e-commerce workforce. And while we do have an increase in standards, we still have discriminatory practices that remain. So a lot of people end up in these jobs, but we're not breaking the ceiling into mid-management or corporate at Amazon and these other larger corporations. And then just across the board, regardless of industry, black workers often face a higher prevalence of workplace injuries and work-related disabilities. And finally, now with the rise of AI and automation and jobs continuing to be sent overseas, we are losing some of those manufacturing jobs. Those jobs for a long time in our community were brought, that held together our middle class. So black people, we've been hit especially hard. Between 1998 and 2020, we lost over 646,000 manufacturing jobs. So there's an opportunity gap. So there is this growing green economy, and it is overwhelmingly white. We are, at the federal and the state level, there are investments being made. So you've probably heard about these in the news recently with the Infrastructure Investment Jobs Act, the Inflation Reduction Act. There is a lot of uncertainty, but a lot of the investment has already been made, and we know that these jobs, we are going to see them over the next decade, and we need to make sure they're prioritized for black people. And at the state level, we have the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act. It basically puts Illinois on a pathway to 100% renewable energy by 2050. It comes with a lot of different things, part of it being EV charging and infrastructure, but to me what stands out the most is this $82 million per year for workforce development, right? You can't tell people, let's move over to clean energy, let's move over to these things, but we're not gonna provide you a pathway to that. And so 40% of that is going towards the environmental justice and low-income communities. Now, these aren't exactly reparations policies, but these do provide a good blueprint. It's not just about clean energy. We have a water infrastructure that needs to be redone. There are tons of jobs that we need to figure out a way, speaking to my lawmakers, to make sure it's prioritized to black people here in Illinois. So I want to pivot and talk about flooding and climate change. I was on the phone with a few organizers a few days ago, and I think it was Ana Garcia Doyle, and she said that flooding is not a nuisance, it is a symptom of climate change. And so while we see wildfires happening in the West, we see hurricanes in the South, Illinois is not gonna be immune, and what we are gonna be seeing is these more intense rainstorms and flooding. And at the same time, we also have this huge divestment in water infrastructure, especially in our communities. And so I just wanted to share a couple of photos to show that flooding really does impact people's lives. So this photo on the left-hand side is a woman on the west side of Chicago. So I don't know if people remember back in July of 2023, it was the NASCAR weekend, the first time they did it, but it was also torrential rains, and people on the west side had their homes destroyed and flooded. This article was from September of 2024. Now the picture, I don't believe it's from 2024, but there were still people waiting for FEMA relief. That's a problem. And then going over to the right-hand side, this is off of, I believe, 67th. Back in 2019 and 2020, we had a lot of, the shoreline was increasing. And this is something that happens, the lake levels go back and forth, but now with climate change, it's increasing in frequency and intensity. And so there was a lot of attention paid to the north side, and and rightfully so, right? There were beaches being swallowed up, but people also forgot and neglected the south side. So while there was investment in infrastructure and rocks and all those things on the north side, this is what was happening on the south side initially. There are people that live on the South Shore in Chicago. There's people that have condos, there's businesses, there's homes, there's beaches in that area, and they deserve the same amount of investment as well. And then, of course, I cannot forget about our rural and suburban brothers and sisters. I don't always want to talk about what's happening in Chicago. We know that there are the Quincy, Illinois, the Robin, Illinois, the Cahokia and Centerville, Illinois in this world. And so this is particularly in the Cahokia Heights, Centerville community. This is on the far southeast, near St. Louis part of the state. And they are dealing with this because of a lack of, basically a failing sewer system. And these issues are being exacerbated by climate change. These are the things that our community faces if we are not having targeted investment in our water infrastructure. And then I want to go to like the last part about brownfields, smog, air quality issues, and cumulative impacts. Slide got a little bit messed up, but basically with brownfields, Typically, you see things like former gas stations, former industrial plants, and abandoned railroads. And the impact of this, right, is not just, oh, it's unsightly, it doesn't look good. There are actual potential hazards in cases of leaks or spills and even natural disasters. And it also has an impact on our property value. So now there's a direct economic impact. And then coupling that with air pollution, right? I talked about the rise of e-commerce. These warehouses are popping up around Illinois, and they're popping up in our communities, not only in the city, but also in the suburbs and the rural areas as well. And people may think it's just a warehouse, but you have to think about the diesel trucks that are coming in and out of there. Amazon is electrifying some of their fleets, that's great, but there's still diesel trucks that are bringing those goods to those warehouses. And then, again, with the history of redlining, we have polluting industries that are concentrated in our communities. A lot of us live near highways and railroads. And then an inaccessible zoning process. Through my work, I go to a lot of zoning committee meetings and a lot of town halls, and often the community is brought in at the end to have a town hall, get some water bottles and some cookies, and say, what do you think? We're gonna do it anyways. And so that is part of the reason why we have a lot of poor air quality in our community as well, and a lack of trees and green space, and then a lack of public transportation. So we should really be thinking about environmental racism from a cumulative perspective, right? So we have the historical redlining, we have even the current zoning policies that put these industries into our community. At the same time, we have a historic divestment in infrastructure in our communities. And then that leads to things like lower property values, lack of businesses, vacant lots, lack of care for the immediate environment, and even population loss. I talked earlier with some folks about, Chicago and even in Evanston, where Black people are being forced out of our communities. And then finally, there's a health and economic impact, right? So we are facing higher rates of asthma, cancer, heart disease. We have a bunch of lead pipes, so we're exposed to lead poisoning. And then again, with those hazardous jobs, we are more at risk for job injury. So people losing wages, losing income, and then also coupled with the higher healthcare cost. So I never want to talk about things without providing any type of a solution. I think to me, the most important is one, reforming the zoning process to prioritize the needs of Black residents. If you are putting something in a predominantly Black community, those are the people that need to be prioritized. We need to have we need to have targeted workforce development opportunities for the Black community. And then when I was doing a lot of this research, I realized there was a lack of Black-specific studies, especially when it comes to environmental pollution. And so we need funding specifically for those studies for Black people. And then targeted buyouts. There are some places where that remediation is not going to happen for decades. There are places where it's going to continue to flood no matter what. People should not be forced to stay in those communities. We should be providing some source of a way out for people, so providing buyouts. So these are just some of the things that could be used as potential solutions that I will definitely pass along to the commission. But with that, I just want to say thank you so much for having me be here. Thank you all for coming out on a Saturday morning. And I'm just very thankful to be here. And if you ever want to contact me, that's my contact information. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ayanna. I would like next to invite to the stage our registered community speakers, starting with Tanika Lewis-Johnson.
Hello, I'm just gonna jump right in. I only have a few minutes. So I'm an artist, and I'm going to demonstrate that by having you all participate. I would like for you to raise your hand if you have heard or have been told that Chicago South Side is dangerous. Raise your hand. Keep them raised. Everybody, look around. Okay, that's everybody. You can put them down. This isn't just an offhand comment. It discourages investment and devalues Black neighborhoods. The devaluation of Black neighborhoods stems from slavery's devaluation of Black life, Today, casually telling people don't go to Black neighborhoods perpetuates the disinvestment, neglect, and fear that systemic racism was designed to create. So I want to show you how that plays out in real life. I created a project called Folded Map. It's an art project. And I want to introduce you to Carmen and Bridget. They live on the same street, Winchester, 15 miles apart in racially and economically different neighborhoods. And Carmen lives in my home neighborhood, Greater Inglewood. And I want to share with you how this difference and the devaluation plays out in just a conversation about how much does your house cost.
Chicago has shifted just in the last couple of years. And when I bought my house 7 years ago, I feel like there was still, Rogers Park was still somewhat affordable in comparison to a lot of Chicago neighborhoods. So I knew I wanted something under $400,000 was what I was looking for. Yeah. I know you're like, well, hold on a second.
And Carmen, you said this building has been in your family, so can you talk about kind of the purchase history? Do you know how much it cost at a time?
No, but I believe it probably was $30,000, you know, but in 74, that was a lot of money, but 30,000, and I think it's probably worth a lot more than that now, but never know.
Carmen's home is worth less because systemic racism devalues Black neighborhoods. Bridget's home is worth more because systemic segregation ensured white neighborhoods thrived. This is not chance, it's racism by design. I want you to take a look at this map so I can show you how racism by design was demonstrated or appears in my home neighborhood of Greater Inglewood, the poster child of everything wrong in Chicago. This map of Greater Inglewood, all of the red dots on this map are all of the homes that were sold to aspiring Black homeowners on land sale contracts. Black families thought they were buying homes, but they weren't. They were charged inflated payments while legally owning nothing. This wasn't just exploitation, it was wealth theft on a massive scale, as documented in the Plunder of Black Wealth in Chicago report in 1999. The impact of all of those 600 plus aspiring Black homeowners who had money to get a down payment but were denied the opportunity to do so, the impact of that was Inglewood's home ownership rate hovers around 30% to this day. 18 schools have closed in Greater Inglewood, and 63rd and Halsted, which was once second to downtown, once was a thriving Black business district, is now largely abandoned. Now let's see what those homes and that loss looks like in my neighborhood today, where people in my generation grew up seeing but not understanding why. This is 7037 South Green, boarded up, vacant, 4 years. Mrs. Berta Mae Godley and Mr. Thomas Lee Chambers, they were sold this home on a land sale contract December 16th, 1965. That began the devaluation and the neglect of this home that they did not get a chance to own. Had they owned it, they would have cared for it. We know that. This is 7250 South Green. Mr. John Gardner, he was sold his home on a land sale contract December 28, 1962. (6823 South Aberdeen, Mr. and Mrs. James and Lula Malone. They were sold their home on a land sale contract October 30th, 1963. These aren't just abandoned buildings. These represent families robbed of wealth, a neighborhood set up to fail, and residents still fighting against systemic neglect. For those still holding on in Inglewood, these decaying homes also drag down property values, making it even harder to build and pass down wealth. This is segregation's aftermath. by design. These homes just don't reveal what was lost. They are the foundation for what we can reclaim. That's why I launched Unblocked Inglewood, another ambitious art project, bold effort to restore an entire block in my home neighborhood that was directly harmed by racist predatory housing practices of the 1950s and 60s. This project was funded through public art grants. So far, Unblocked Inglewood has repaired 12 homes with 13 more to go, installed vibrant murals, built block club signs, and strengthened neighborhood ties, partnered with residents to acquire and revitalize vacant lots that they've cared for years. This isn't just about fixing homes. This project is about demonstrating how to reclaim stolen wealth creatively, restoring dignity, and proving what's possible with real investment and repair. This is what Inglewood could have been and still can be. If harm was done intentionally, then reparations must be intentional. If harm was done geographically, then reparations must be geographical. That means prioritizing Chicago's Black neighborhoods for, as Robin Rue Simmons mentioned earlier, home ownership and home repair for support of Black residents. I personally believe financial restitution for the over 3,000 families who were exploited by land sale contracts in Chicago, and then community-led revitalization that empowers longtime residents to shape their future. These homes and this map and this project prove that reparations aren't just about acknowledgments, they're about action. We have the evidence, we have the stories, now we need the will to act and to keep pushing this movement forward and to build the future Chicago's Black neighborhoods have been denied. Thank you.
And next, I would like to invite to the stage Director Alonzo Wahid.
How you all doing today? My name is Alonzo Wahid. I'm the Program Director with Equity and Transformation. Equity and Transformation mission is to build social and economic equity for the Black workers that's engaged in the informal economy. One of the things that I learned throughout my life is that a lot of times individuals will not applaud you or celebrate you. So you have to learn how to do that for yourselves. We at Equity and Transformation also understand that there's a lot of times that we as a people fight to be at everybody else's table. At Equity and Transformation, we believe that we have to create our own table. So if you ain't got it yet, Equity and Transformation means eat, E-A-T. And we believe that we all have to eat. And if you don't eat, you starve. So let's get into it. I'm not just the Program Director with Equity and Transformation. I'm also a father. I'm a son, I'm a businessman, and I'm also a husband. But that's not it. I'm also an individual that has been directly negatively impacted by the war on drugs. The historical harm of the war on drugs has devastated the African American community. In Illinois, we have suffered severe harms at the hands of an unjust legal system, both past and present. Harsh sentencing laws, such as mandatory minimums and three-strike policies, led to the mass incarceration of Black individuals for nonviolent drug offenses at disproportionately high rates. The criminalization of drug addiction and aggressive policing tactics devastated our communities and families. It led to cycles of poverty, disenfranchisement, and economic instability. In cities like Chicago, targeted law enforcement strategies such as stop and frisk disproportionately affected Black residents, reinforcing systematic racism and limiting opportunities for advancement. Even in the present day, the effects of these policies still linger. Criminal records from past convictions continue to serve as barriers to employment, housing, and education, making it difficult for individuals to reintegrate into society. Despite efforts at legal reform, racial disparities persist in sentencing, incarceration rates, and access to justice. So, as we create our own table, we would like to offer an alternative solution, and it's called the Big Payback. The Big Payback seeks to address these ongoing harms through targeted reparations measures designed to restore justice and uplift affected communities. The Big Payback campaign is more than just a call for reparations. It is a comprehensive movement that recognizes the harm done by systematic injustices and seek to provide tangible solutions to address the economic, social, and cultural gaps that persist in our society. Rooted in restorative justice, this campaign emphasizes the importance of repair, reconciliation, and forward momentum for those who have been historically marginalized. Specifically, the Big Payback campaign focuses on reparations for the devastating impacts of the war on drugs, which disproportionately harmed African American communities through mass incarceration, economic disenfranchisement, and social fragmentation. Let's think about this for a moment. Individuals were locked up for selling drugs, but the individuals that brought the drugs over here and put the whole scheme together were never held accountable. How do we sit idly by knowing this and point our finger and say, you know what, these individuals will never be repaired? Let's get right to it. The Iran-Contra affair was an illegal war, and it was funded by the sale of illegal drugs that was pushed into Black communities. All right? So, the vision at its core, the Big Payback campaign aims to acknowledge the historical injustices and systematic barriers that have disproportionately impacted African American communities. It will advocate for policies and practices that promote reparative solutions, including direct advancements, education, housing, healthcare, and economic development. And it will activate communities to engage in meaningful dialogue, advocacy, and co-effective action. Our vision is one where communities that have been neglected for generations are not only acknowledged, but also equipped to be able to have the resources and opportunities needed to thrive. The campaign is driven by the key pillars of reparations. In equity and transformation, we believe that if all 5 pillars are not met, it is not true reparations. These 5 pillars are compensation, providing direct financial resources and investment in individuals and communities that have been disproportionately impacted by the war on drugs and systematic inequities. Restoration, supporting efforts to rebuild and revitalize neighborhoods and institutions that was dismantled or weakened due to policies rooted in systematic racism. Rehabilitation, offering programs that address the physical, mental, and social health needs of those impacted by the war on drugs, including addiction treatment and trauma recovery services. Satisfaction, recognizing and addressing the harm through public apologies, memorials, and other forms of symbolic redress that validate the experience of those harmed. And last but not least, a guarantee of non-repetition. I'm gonna say that one more time. A guarantee of non-repetition. What we witnessed today was a history of how a law could be written and then readdressed and then rewritten to still commit the same harm. And we're saying enough is enough. We want the law to say that never again will you be able to do this. I want you, before I go to the next part, I want you all to think about something that we went over with Mr. Cummings a little earlier. Imagine for a moment being able to work for the state government, But the only reason that you can't work for the state government is because you walked outside of the penitentiary. Think about that. I was qualified enough to be able to work for the state government. And the only reason I can no longer work for the state government because I walked out of the penitentiary. All right, because that is exactly what he explained to us today. And I did not want that to go over individuals' heads. If the state of Illinois is saying that that individual is qualified to work for the government, but only while they're in prison, that is a problem. You may say, Alonzo, all of that sounds good. But why does this matter to the ADCRC? As leaders committed to advancing equity and resolving disputes, your support and partnership are crucial to the success of the Big Payback campaign. The ADCRC has a unique ability to serve as a bridge between community voices and institutional change, to leverage its influence to advocate for policies that align with the campaign's goals, and to mediate and facilitate discussions that bring diverse stakeholders together to find common ground. Together, we can build a model for restorative justice that not only addresses past wrongs, but also lays the foundation for a future rooted in fairness and opportunity. I invite the ADCRC to join us in this transformative movement, whether through endorsing a campaign, providing mediation support, or collaborating on specific initiatives. Your involvement can make a significant change. We are stronger when we work together, and your experience is invaluable as we navigate this crucial journey. The Big Payback campaign is about more than reparations. It's about reclaiming dignity, restoring hope, and rewriting the narrative for generations to come. I want you all to be able to say this part with me as I close, because it's very meaningful that, especially for us as a people. So I just ask you all to repeat this after me. It is our duty to fight for our freedom. And it is our duty to win. We must love each other and support each other. We have nothing to lose but our chains. Thank you.
And next, I would like to invite to the stage Jeffrey Beckham Jr.
All right, I guess it's still good morning, everyone. Good morning. Good morning to the commissioners, community leaders, and fellow advocates. First, I want to start by thanking the ADCRC for this work and for your sacrifice. It does not go without notice that you all are giving time, effort, your personal freedom to do this great work, and we want to say thank you on behalf of the community. I have the privilege to stand before you today, not only as the CEO of Chicago Scholars and an artist, but as a Black man who deeply understands both the historical injustices that have shaped our communities and the economic urgency required to correct them. The case for reparations is not just a moral imperative, it is an economic necessity. Dr. King once said that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. However, justice does not happen passively. It requires action, investment, and commitment. Reparations are that commitment. A commitment to repairing the systemic harm inflicted upon the Black community through redlining, disinvestment, housing contracts, systemic oppression, discriminatory policies that have robbed generations of wealth and opportunity from our communities. Education has always been one of the most powerful tools for empowerment, yet it has been systemically weaponized against Black communities. After slavery ended, Black Americans were deliberately excluded from educational systems, while white Americans benefited from government subsidized public education, the GI Bill. And despite the enormous barriers Black communities built, We built our own schools during Reconstruction, only to see them burned or defunded by white supremacists and state policies. In the 20th century, the Jim Crow era enriched this inequity. Black schools received only a fraction of the resources provided to white schools, leaving generations uneducated and economically disadvantaged. Even after the landmark Brown versus the Board of Education decision in 1954, efforts to integrate schools were slow and met with violent resistance. Today, the ripple effects are undeniable. Schools in predominantly black neighborhoods still receive $23 billion in less funding annually than schools in predominantly white areas, despite serving equal numbers of students. Just in Chicago, the average commute time of a black student is 45 minutes more than that of their white counterparts. Black students disproportionately attend schools in districts with crumbling infrastructure, outdated technology, and fewer AP classes, advanced placement, limiting access to college preparation. And even yesterday, a horde of state-sponsored individuals stood in front of the Department of Education and put chains on the door, denying access to an organization that provides essential funding for school infrastructure, teacher induction, and training. According to the U.S. Department of Education, black students are nearly 4 times more likely than white students to be suspended, further disrupting the educational progress. This educational disinvestment has led directly to economic disparities. A report from the Federal Reserve shows that the median wealth of a black family in the U.S. is just $24,000 compared to $188,000 for the average white family. And at the current pace of decline, black family wealth will be negative by 2035. This gap is no accident. It is the direct result of policies that intentionally stripped black families of the tools to build generational wealth, including equitable access to education. Education is not only about knowledge, it's the foundation of economic mobility. When educational access is denied, entire communities are locked out of opportunities. Consider these additional data points. Black college graduates carry 50% more student debt than white graduates from 4-year universities after earning their degrees, largely because of the historic inability to build generational wealth to offset costs. Just last year, many of my students waited months on end to apply for the FAFSA when the system was down. Supposed to be up Jan 1, many of our students went into the year not knowing where funding for college would come from. Black professionals with a bachelor's degree earn 20% less than white counterparts with the same qualification, perpetuating the cycle of inequality. The unemployment rate for black Americans remains consistently twice as high as that for white Americans, even during times of economic growth. President Obama said we need to uphold laws against discrimination, but we also have to acknowledge that our institutions and our policies still perpetuate racial disparities in wealth and income, in education and skills. Reparations are a direct way to address this. This must go beyond systemic and symbolic gestures. This must focus on measurable economic empowerment through education, housing, business development, and workforce development. How can reparations change the future? At Chicago Scholars, I've worked tirelessly to counteract these disparities. We've helped over 6,000 first-generation or low-income students from Chicago access higher education and more than $700 million in merit aid. These scholars, many of whom come from Chicago's most underserved neighborhoods, where I come from, where Tanika just talked about, are transforming their families' futures through education. And they're creating opportunities through entrepreneurship and raising venture capital and equipping their own students, black and brown youth, with the tools to succeed in industries where they've largely been misrepresented and historically absent. One of my students, Stephen Wilson, created something called the Unprecedented Shy, a young man from Inglewood who attends Ohio State University majoring in mechanical engineering. The Unprecedented awards 6 scholarships, $1,000 scholarships to young men from Inglewood, gives them headshots, custom suits, the whole 9. Steve is 22 years old. He's done this for the last 5 years. But students like Steve and nonprofit work alone cannot undo the centuries of systemic harm caused by slavery, segregation, and discriminatory policy. Reparations are essential to scaling these efforts. Imagine what could be achieved if we funded historically disinvested schools to the same levels as suburban schools. If we invested in tuition-free higher education for Black students, or if we seeded capital for Black entrepreneurs. The return on this investment would be immense, not just for Black families, but for the economic health of the entire state. Reparations are not about handouts. They're about restoring what was stolen and creating the conditions for equity. Black Americans built the wealth of this nation through centuries of unpaid labor. They fueled its economy through culture and innovation. Yet the return on that contribution has been systemic exclusion, and systems work just the way they're intended to. Reparations are not just a moral obligation, but a sound economic policy that will foster growth, entrepreneurship, and innovation. As leaders in Illinois, I urge you all, we have the power to set a precedent for the nation. Let us move beyond rhetoric into real, measurable action. As I close, I'll leave you with a favorite story of mine I heard Timmy O'Black say. There was a hummingbird in the forest who was trying to put out a fire. And the hummingbird was swimming back and forth, flying, gathering water from the local stream, trying to put out a burning forest fire. And all of the animals in the forest looked at the hummingbird and said, "What are you doing? It's useless." I know oftentimes we feel like we talk about reparations in our community, in our own community, folks tell you it's useless. But I'm like the hummingbird who looked back at all the animals of the forest and said very simply, I'm gonna do whatever I can do for as long as I can. Thank you very much. God bless you all.
And next, I would like to invite to the stage Dr. Griffin.
Greetings, everyone. And I would like to thank the commission for inviting me back. And I'm here representing the West Side NAACP, where our president is Carl Brinson. We meet every first Saturday of the month, 5820 West Chicago Avenue, Sankofa, 1 p.m. We would love to see your beautiful face in the place. My topic, infrastructure and racism. In 1966, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. moved with his family, the entire family, to an apartment at 1550 South Hamlin in North Lawndale. Dr. King came to expose the terrible living conditions that so many on the West Side endured and continues today. Additionally, Dr. King planned to take action and schedule marches that stretched to Marquette Park and Cicero. These marches aim to classify racism as a national problem. The apartment the civil rights leader moved into had no heat, no running water, and no electricity. The floors were dirty and the door was broken, not to mention an overpowering stench that filled the building. The eradication of these living conditions was part of Dr. King's plan for redistribution of economic and social power. However, that goal has yet to be mastered. Therefore, Dr. King's work has yet to be completed. Why must we wait? We continue to wait for infrastructure funding to be properly dispersed to all communities on the west side of Chicago to do complete renovation for some of our problems. We still have rundown buildings and people reside in on the west and south sides of Chicago because people cannot afford the high prices of rent or a mortgage, which has caused a lot of health issues. past and present, to our seniors and children. Asthma is up to the roof. Bronchitis, you name it. In the past, highways coerced people out of their homes on the west side by physically cutting through existing neighborhoods, purposely targeting majority of the minority communities. Homes and businesses were demolished that forced people to relocate due to construction of large highways, which disproportionately displaced low-income residents and contributed to racial segregation. The targeted areas were neighborhoods where planners routed highways through impoverished communities consisting of Black and brown residents to get rid of the slums in the Black community. The government used the power of eminent domain to get land for highway construction with no compassion for the residents. In fact, displaced residents often face challenges trying to find appropriate housing and continued racial segregation patterns. This was discussed by one of my participants in Evanston. It was happening all over the country. Sounds familiar? This is exactly what is happening right now in California due to the wildfires. People want to rebuild their houses, and it appears to be a struggle. The daughter of a good friend who is a business owner and others are ready for the fight to rebuild what was lost in their community. In my dissertation, participants in Evanston were asked the following question: if reparations passed in the United States, what do you think that would or would not do for racism in our country? They all had great answers and all agreed that racism would never go away because racism is embedded in this country and would never let Blacks ascend to where they needed to be in life. As one participant stated, racism is a social, economic, political, and biological concept because we now have more. Unfortunately, it is not enough. We can no longer wait. We have surpassed the due date. Please, reparations now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Griffin, and all of our registered community speakers. Now we will be turning to public comment. One-way comment, no response. You will all have 2 minutes to give your comment. There was a sign-up sheet, and we will be going by number. We will call up the first 4, so numbers 1 through 4, to begin public comment. We will start with number 1, Dr. Akila Mukaram.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for this opportunity. I am Dr. Akila Mukaram, President of the Afro-Descendant Nation. My comment today is on the Afro-Descendant identity. Oh, yes, ma'am. Okay, I am Dr. Akila Mukaram, President of the Afro-Descendant Nation. My comment today is in 2002, at a United Nations sponsored forum in La Ceiba, Honduras, there were 19 countries, including the United States and the slavery diaspora, that decided and agreed that we would be known as or identified as Afro-descendant people. We know that reparations is usually paid to a people, a country, right? So our identity as Afro-descendant people is vital to us receiving reparations. So if you look at the Jewish people and where they are on the world stage now, you look at us, everywhere that we go, we are treated as underlings in society. Okay, so the indigenous people, all of them, different tribes, they identified as one people, although they were different tribes. So there are so many, we have different organizations, we go by different names. So Afro-descendant is just an enhancement to our identity that was stripped from us when our foreparents, our ancestors came here, brought here. We didn't come of free will, brought here and enslaved. So since our identity was stripped, and here in America, they took the language from us. Some of our brothers and sisters globally, they can still speak the language. But our slave masters here were so brutal that they took the language. So we don't know which area we came from. So now we need to go back and identify as a people. And we have been given that opportunity, blessed with that opportunity, to be identified as Afro-descendant people. Help me to create awareness and education for our people so that we can make Afro-descendant, our identity, a household name, and achieve our dignity once again as a people. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now hear this. Now hear this. Reparation now. Reparation now. All right, everybody. Good evening, good afternoon. My name is Brother Darrell Hurd. I am the Chicago NCOBRA chapter co-chair. And as everybody heard, NCOBRA is an organization specifically for reparation. We have heard all of the historical data and the harms due from slavery and from chattel slavery of this country. We know that all the ongoing problems that this country is facing with the new administration. So on behalf of the reparation movement and all the coalitions here, I just want to applaud you and say, would you join NCOBRA in the future movements for reparation? Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dr. Edward Davis IV. I just wanted to say hello and greetings, especially to the ADCRC for this great event. Thank you to Commissioner Roger Elian and so many others. I was able to join in July and give a talk, and that was very appreciative of that. And I'm just thinking of the comment that the doctor just made a little while ago. I am a descendant of 2 of the 32 Africans from Congo, Angola, who were kidnapped in 1619 and brought to colonial Virginia. This is my grandmother's people who eventually came to Illinois through the Trail of Tears and established Underground Railroad towns in Brownfield in Pope County, Illinois. And since that talk in July, my grandmother has become an ancestor. But a lot of what people were saying, just in terms of the conditions in Inglewood. I live in Auburn Gresham, in a house my grandparents bought 60 years ago. And it just makes me think I am the first descendant of 1619 of what we call Malungians to go to Malanje, Angola in 2016. And then I lived in Congo for 2 years in 2006, 7, 8. And I'm a linguistic anthropologist. So I can really help you with this issue of restoring the languages that were stripped from us. So I'm just here to bring awareness to so many of those. When I come to these events, I tend to be the only descendant of the triracial Malungians of 1619. And we are people who really need to be out there in the forefront when we talk about 1619 or we talk about reparations or we talk about all of this, because we've got to document every person from every ship. We've got to document every atrocity that happened to get the trillions of dollars that are owed to us. And I say this right now, in this moment of political uncertainty, I think of 2030, 2035, and I think of these people, these billionaires who are just collectively putting our reparations together so that we can see in one place where we will be able to get it all, the trillions that are owed to us. So don't worry, don't stress in this moment. It's all coming together for good. Thank you.
Can we have number 4, Malcolm London? All right. Can I call numbers 5 through 8 up, please?
Hello, everyone. Hey, Senator Johnson. I'm like a little nervous, but I work with an amazing organization called Good Tars Over Guns. My name is Erica, forgot to mention that. I remember in 2018 when I was in graduate school for economic development, and this topic specifically about reparations in Evanston was like a topic, and I had to debate why it would work. And I was debating my peers in 2018 of like why this would work. So I'm like super honored and excited to see that it has worked. Yeah, that it's a big deal. It's a big deal. And one thing that I just wanted to throw out there in the context of just building different initiatives is if has there been a thought about how can we build career pathways to actually put youth in roles that are actually decision-making roles? Because there's so many things that we need to do from a holistic perspective to combat the racial injustices that we have faced. And one of them is really putting people and youth and building a pipeline into decision-making roles. I'm super passionate about my work that I do with Good Tars Over Guns, where we deal with violence prevention, but also in the work of just like architecture. The number of architects have been Black. There's 4% of Black architects, and that number has been the same for the last 60 years. So when we think about the people that are in decision-making roles, deciding how our cities are going to be built, there needs to be some bigger conversations about how can we support our youth and build a pipeline, because we know that this is a long-term game, and this is not going to happen overnight. So I just want to applaud you all for this work. I remember seeing it being launched in 2018 when I was in school. So I'm so excited to see what is next. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Anya Baida, and I'm just here to say thank you to the commission for all their work. Keep doing what you're doing. I know it's going to be a long game, especially in this political climate. But what you're doing is not falling on deaf ears. We're all in this together. And so thank you, everybody, for being here today. That's all I want to say.
I would tell y'all my name is Evelyn Johnson, but somebody might say, no, you Mama E. Come on, Mama. I have been working in the community since 1970. And some of the things that need to be corrected in our community, stop saying all of our young people are drug dealers. Because I worked with a commander and we sent 3 groups of police to jail for selling drugs in the Inglewood community. But that ain't the problem. The problem is this. They go after our men. Do you know Y'all be talking about CHA. You want to know what they did in Chicago in the 80s? They told every married man that lived in housing that lost their job, if they wanted their children and wives to be taken care of, they would have to leave. So you got a whole generation of young people born between 1960 and 1979 thinking their fathers walked away from their homes, and they didn't do it. Even today, in the Inglewood community, 7th District Police, they got a sergeant that a young girl has claimed that that sergeant has raped her on her way to school, and the commander told her she was a liar, and he's still on the job. And I can tell you this, if I see him and the brothers that I know over here, he won't be the police no more, okay? You talk about our school system. One year, you know why, and you, State Rep Sonia, she know how long I've been doing this in the community. And now I'm going to tell you why I stopped working with Chicago Public Schools. Because they had a jerk that was in charge of their school that got 1,000 complaints from children about being touched, and he told the parents they were lying. Oh, no, I called him out when he ran for mayor. That's my time. I will give Sonia some other information because it's a whole lot y'all need to know about reparations. You know who the zero population is? Go and find them black men that they took off the street and took them straight to Statesville Prison and kept them there.
Number 8, Ms. Coles. Can we also have Cam Howard to the front?
African Americans are recognized by the UN as being Holocaust citizens. We are the Holocaust citizens that were forced to build the inherited wealth, the corporate wealth, and the governmental wealth of this country. But yet we're treated like refugees in our own country. We're ethnically cleansed off the land disproportionately at the same rate that they incarcerate our men and use them as slave labor. They ethnically cleanse African American women off of the land. And that's the book Evicted, for example, and a report that the Harvard professor who wrote that book cited that in his report. Also, I wanted to say, as Holocaust citizens at the federal level, we should be getting affordable housing set-asides, and we should be getting that first and foremost and the most. And then also as well, too, nationally, as well as the Illinois state, needs to have a just cause eviction law, as well as the fact that we also need rent control nationally, and as far as also the state of Illinois, because we're disproportionately made homeless, tax-paying American citizens and treated like refugees in the country we were forced to build. Thank you.
Greetings, everyone. My name is Cam Howard, Executive Director of Reparations United. Mama E, it's a pleasure. It's Africa and everyone who spoke today. Thank you. I have a question and then an announcement. My question is, how many of us believe that every entity that was involved in the enslavement of our ancestors should be brought to justice? All right. So I believe the same thing, Reparations United, and fortunately, the commission and State Rep Sonia Harper also believes the same thing. On January the 9th, State Rep Harper introduced the Enslavement Era Disclosure and Redress Act in the state of Illinois General Assembly under House Bill 1227. This bill requires that every entity that wants to do business with the state of Illinois must research its records, determine whether or not it had any complicity with the harm of our ancestors during the enslavement era, disclose that, have a public meeting to share that disclosure with the community, and then file a statement of financial redress to begin to do into a reparative fund to begin to repair some of the harms that they helped create. How many of y'all think that's a great bill? All right, give our State Rep Harper a hand. HB 1227. State Senator Willie Preston has introduced it under Senate Bill 21, I think it's 2221, a companion bill. It's not going to get passed unless we do the work to get it passed. On January 28th, we held a press conference in Springfield to announce this legislation. Right after the press conference, we had 4 state reps who signed on as special co-sponsors, and we had another 18 that signed on as co-sponsors. So we have over 23 reps, thanks to State Rep Harper, as co-sponsors to this legislation. But again, you're not going to pass this legislation with just, is that my time? We're not going to pass this legislation just with co-sponsors. Brother Darrell came up here earlier with NCOBRA, go to NCOBRA, Chicago. NCOBRA is helping lead the way in getting that bill passed into law. The commission also supported this legislation, so we need your help to get that bill passed.
Thank you. That will now be the conclusion of our public comment section. I would like to acknowledge a few individuals, specifically Dr. Atiera Coleman, the Chief Equity Officer in the Office of Governor J.B. Pritzker, and her staff. I would also like to call to the stage Congressman Jackson to give remarks. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon. Thank you so much. I want to first acknowledge my profound appreciation for the members of this august body, the members that are championing this legislation, that have put in the groundwork, that have been the activists, that have been the fuel that's made the state recognize you, and for the great works that's happening right here in the city of Evanston. The nation has their eyes on what Evanston is doing, a city that was founded by those abolitionists, a city that was founded as a part of the Underground Railroad in 1863. Let's give our panelists and all those responsible a loving round of applause. Hello, Deborah. Hello, Jackie. Congressman Jonathan Jackson, I'm proud to serve you, proud to serve with my dear colleague, Congresswoman Jan Schakowsky, and all that she does. She's a voice that I can constantly count on to do the right things, to be in support. I call Jan my sister. She's more of a friend and also a colleague. But what I want to say about reparations and what this commission means, it's always been important, but now it's so urgent that these issues be confronted. What I've seen in Washington, D.C. in this last week, of course, is unprecedented, where lawmakers cannot enter federal properties that we have jurisdiction over. Someone says, I didn't see you at the lockout of the Department of Education. I said, did you know there was a lockout at the Department of the Treasury? Did you know there was a lockout at the USAID? There are lockouts happening all over town. I said, I was at USAID. I served on foreign affairs. It's how ironic that the wealthiest man on earth, Mr. Elon Musk, and the most powerful man on earth, Mr. Donald J. Trump, have created an unholy matrimony and are now taking food out of the mouths of the poorest men and women on earth. As we speak right now, the AIDS vaccinations are caged up and aren't being distributed. As we speak right now, the malaria drugs are not being distributed. As we speak right now, the food for USAID is not being distributed. People are dying right now because of their lack of food and medication that we've already appropriated. The Congress has a separation of powers. We do the appropriations. This is law. This has already been passed. It is not his right to stop that. What he's doing is a federal purge, and I tell you, the first step, and it's in page maybe 256, 258 in his project 2025, that they were going to attack the USAID. This is the trial run. The golden apple of their eyes, the gem that they're trying to get, their crown jewel, is they want to dismantle the Department of Education. There are 15 major cabinet positions, and this happens to be the smallest one. Can you believe the Department of Education wasn't created until 1990 by Jimmy Carter? How can we go from 1776 until 1980? The Department of Education isn't that old. If I look at, and so it's the fourth smallest with only 4,400 people, but that distributes the Title I money for food and the equal access to opportunity. That created some state standards by which people that were going to get federal scholarships had to go into the states, and the states had to have a standard. So when they talk about a merit-based system, what is the merit when you've got a Pete Hegseth that's anti-DEI that should be focused on his own DUIs? I mean, what is the merit? I said it. I mean, what is the merit base of the system? You've got this thing of plutocrats and those that are extremely wealthy that are filling our halls of government that are most incompetent. I mean, what's he doing is he's putting those persons that have the most animosity and anger towards the agencies in charge of them to destroy them. He's not trying to build and extend. He's got people that are on a wrecking ball. What's the lady over at the Department of Education? She's with the WWF Wrestling Federation. She could care less about education and the other things. You've got Mr. Hegseth. You've got Mr. Kennedy. That's fine, but talking about DUI, if we have too many parking tickets, we cannot get these jobs. And this man, I have tremendous respect for people that are recovering substance abuse users, but this man is not qualified. He's not a medical physician. He's not a doctor. He's an anti-vaxxer, and people have died because of the rhetoric that he has spewed out there. So the Reparations Commission, if we're not talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, diversity, equity, and inclusion, those are not bad words. I'm not going to let him make DEI bad words. They make America better. And for him to say the people in these agencies that have worked there cannot work in another federal agency. I mean, it's another alphabet and you hear all these terms, but the DEI, he has turned that and he's weaponized it. And it means so much to so many different people. Women need DEI in order to have interviews, to get jobs, and to deal with healthcare issues so that we can see how people are responding to medicines in phase 1, 2, 3, and on in clinical trials. Different children need DEI and diversity so we can have curb cuts, so people can have access to wheelchairs and other things. Talented African-American students that have never had an opportunity to get an interview need DEI. We're not going to let him weaponize that and turn it around. It's a voluntary program. It's aspirational. There's no timelines and quotas on it. And the reason I said your work is so urgent before I sit down, if we're not talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, therefore, I'm proud to be at Northwestern today to talk about reparations. The softer side of reparations, of cutting a check, of building the institutions, was a negotiated side to have affirmative action. Then it got watered down to diversity and to equity and inclusion. You take it off the table, how can we make racial and social and justice progress? Then we have to talk about reparations. And so I'm proud of the work that you're doing, the institutions that need to be created as a result of reparations, the non-discriminatory institutions. What happened during the mortgage crisis, we saw was an example of why we need new institutions. African Americans, it was the Red Book report coming out of the Bank of Boston at their Federal Reserve Bank. It showed, that's the first time that I could trace the word subprime. It showed African Americans that had the same credit scores as whites paid more for a loan than Caucasians. They paid more for less. You got to read the book 1984 to keep up with their language. Everything they say is trickery and upside down. You pay more for less. That was the Red Book for the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston. Then it showed if African Americans had more income than Caucasians, they paid more. It showed that if they had a higher credit score, Jackie, they paid more. And so at the heart of what happened during that case, and Dr. Fritz Kaeg, your friend, can tell you even more, is that we were overcharged. So you put a bubble into the credit markets, and it popped. And it wasn't in part because of the money that was lent to African Americans and women in subprime. It was popped when they had the loan to values that were 100% that they gave to the majority. You got to be clear on what the narrative is. So they're trying to weaponize that. And I want you to know, stand up for it. This past week, I had the opportunity to speak at the bipartisan prayer breakfast for the Congress for the 73rd annual occasion. And I said, the divine, the eternal, and the incomparable gracious God. The divine, the eternal, and the incomparable. I put my DEI right in the middle of my speech. Use that word. Let's not let it die. Reparations now, we need it. It's fair, it's just, there's precedent. Every other country that's come out of our history, it's happened in Brazil, it's happened in India. We need to bring it right here to America. We will not let Mr. Elon Musk, who comes from South Africa, who says reverse discrimination is racism. He says affirmative action is racism. Mr. Elon Musk, he does not believe in a composite society. That was not his upbringing. Mr. Peter Thiel, who put up $20 million to back J.D. Vance to become senator, he comes from South Africa. Mr. Sachs, another South African. We've got South Africans surrounding the President of the United States that want to remake in their image the United States of America. I want the high-tech bros, those that go to Mar-a-Lago, all to go back to where they came from.
Thank you, Congressman Jackson. Before I turn the mic over to Vice Chair Taylor to discuss the ADCRC plans and next steps, I would first like to invite the community to engage with the ADCRC. We have monthly meetings the third Friday of every month. We are constantly having communications around what our next steps will be, conversations regarding the Slavery Era Disclosure and Redress Act, conversations regarding data disaggregation, specifically for those who are African Americans that descend from slavery, so that exists in data so we know what to go after and for who. So we invite the community into that conversation. I would like to now turn over the mic to Vice Chair Steph Taylor. And before Vice Chair takes the mic, I would like to ask all of the former speakers from the previous Chicago public hearing to stand up and be acknowledged. Vice Chair.
What a powerful, powerful day we've had today. As we conclude today's powerful hearing, I want to take a moment to acknowledge the depth of discussions we've had and the invaluable contributions of our speakers and commissioners. This hearing is not just a moment, it is a part of a larger movement, a journey towards truth, justice, and reparative action. Our work does continue, and I am pleased to announce that our next public hearing will take place in Southern Illinois, specifically in Belleville, which is not only the region that I am from, your vice chairman, but also the home of the Illinois Juneteenth Committee that needs your help. A key partner in this work, this hearing will also will allow us to deepen our engagement with communities in Southern Illinois, ensuring that every voice is heard and that the impacts of this historical injustice are fully documented across our state. I encourage everyone here today to stay connected, spread the word, and support our efforts in preparing for Belleville. We need your voices, your testimonies, and your advocacy to continue building the case for reparations in Illinois. Thank you again for being part of this critical work. Together we rise.
before we adjourn, I would like to extend an invitation to the next public hearing, which will be in Belleville in April. Please remain abreast of our website. That information will come out so you can all register if you would like to make the drive down to the southern part of our state. With that being said, I would like to adjourn our public hearing and thank you all for coming. Can all of our speakers come to the stage? And legislators, we would like to take a few photos.